Okay, good morning, everyone. It's 10:30, so we'll make a start. I declare the council meeting CL 23/5 open and welcome everyone here. Please note the meeting is being live streamed and the consequences of that. I have an apology from Councillor Coxhead and call for a mover and seconder to accept that. Councillor Henry, Councillor Granger, put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. There are no late items. Are there any declarations of interest? No, thank you. There are no public excluded items. So we'll now move to public forum, where I have Glenn Crowther from Sustainable BOP Trust to give his presentation. So Mr. Crowther, if you'd like to come to the front, please.
Kia ora. Thank you very much for having us here today. I'm Glenn, and this is Joe, who's one of our trustees. And I guess I know some of you know a bit about our trust. We've interacted with a number of you, but I wanted to do with the new council. We haven't had a chance to come in and present what we do, what we're about. And I do have apologies from our other two trustees who are You have to keep pushing it? Oh, okay. Yes. Hold on, why am I not pressing? Well, I need my other glasses I need to go on next. So one of the key things that we're trying to convey to people in this sub-region is that we're very much about economic and social sustainability as well as environmental. So we're a sustainability organisation, but I know there are a lot of people who just instantly go to sort of the green environmental side. But we see these are all key aspects of what we need to grapple with as a region, as a sub-region. And I guess our angle that we're taking is that we're independent, we're strategic, and we're trying to be as evidence-based as we can in what we're doing. So there are a number of organisations who are doing great work in each of these areas. In the environmental space, there are ones like EnviroHub, Bay Conservation Alliance, all these different community networks and organisations that are similar in the social space. We're not trying to jump in and reinvent wheels or anything, but we see a gap at a strategic level that there hasn't been an independent organisation trying to look at a lot of the key issues that are facing our region. I don't know if I need to grapple with this a bit better. So our funders, we've got 3-year funding agreements from the Regional Council and Bay Trust, and we have a number of other funders. You'll see at the bottom there that there's a little question mark. We're seeing a nice little slot that at some point would be lovely to have your council support us. And we're happy to take guidance in terms of whether that's best through an application into a long-term plan or into this year's annual plan or anything else that you see. But fundamentally, where most of our money goes on, gosh, I'm struggling with this little thing, on staff. So I'm in a full-time role and we have Erin in an admin support role. So I'd say 80% of our costs are probably on salaries, and we try to keep everything else as lean as we can. We're working primarily in the Western Bay, Tauranga area, and in the Eastern Bay, and at this stage, not so much in Rotorua. Though we had a good meeting with the mayor there recently, and happy to sort of support where we can in that area. Collaboration is the key. We're sort of working with a number of networks and pretty much across the board. So we have found really, example is that I know there's sort of a reputation of some of the resident ratepayer groups who I hear are not so interested in sustainability. And I went last year to the Mount Residents Ratepayers and Retailers group, and they were incredibly enthusiastic about a lot of the sustainability issues. So I think what I've found is that once you actually explain some of the things that we're trying to look at, the work we're trying to do, I think we've had a lot of good support from a lot of people, including the businesses who've sponsored some of our events. And I know some of you have been to the Green Drinks events, and that's the kind of thing that we're able to do because of that financial support. We've got sort of like a challenge that someone asked us to sort of lay out what we're really trying to do. And we're just trying to be one little piece of this big picture issue, which is that there are all sorts of things that we're grappling with, you're grappling with as a council, and the country's grappling with. And I think, what we're trying to do is just to get a better evidence base there, to try and lay out suggestions and to help support the organisations that are already working in that space. I will address what I see as a fairly topical issue. And we're not so much pushing specific climate change policies, but we are concerned that there's a lack of evidence and being used in a lot of the discussions around climate change. And that's happening at a national level and an international level. Same's happening in the transport planning, not so much with the team at this council. I think Gary and the whole team are doing a great job, but I think within the sub-region, there's some real challenges around trying to look at, are we actually building the kind of things we need to get the outcomes people are talking about? So to give you a feel for, with climate change, that this is a graph that shows where New Zealand ranks internationally in terms of net emissions since 1990. I think it's a year or so old, this graph, but we're there or thereabouts still, which shows that we're not performing. If you can sort of see there, we're right at the bad end of it, where we've increased emissions significantly, CO2 emissions. And you have a whole lot of other countries who we like to compare ourselves to that are actually doing a lot better. And you can see in the Climate Tracker organization, which is an international independent organization that looks at all the plans around climate change and compares various countries. And you can see there that they've very recently done New Zealand and said we're still highly insufficient compared to Australia, US, and the UK. We're doing far, far worse. And this is, this is on a number of aspects of it. So it's the plans themselves, the targets, the ability to achieve the plans, the outcomes. And you just look at that and you think, well, we're definitely not a leader in climate change. And I think a lot of the decisions that even through to, to councils that are being made seem to be in the context that we are a bit of a leader. We don't want to go too hard. But I think whatever the decision that is made by central government, by local government, it needs to be in that context that we're certainly not leading the world in this space. At a local level, just to pick an example, and I know it's one that I've had discussions with some of the councillors from Western Bay from the previous council, that we're concerned about a number of projects that are taking place sort of under the smart growth umbrella through what I know Mayor Webber sort of told me was not really the Western Bay Transport Plan, but that's the name on the document. So I sort of took it at face value. And one of those projects, Cameron Road, is still being touted by one of your fellow councils in the region as being a low carbon project. And so we have great problems with when, it's one thing to not build low carbon projects, but it's quite another to actually build a high carbon project and call it a low carbon project. So we really want to sort of raise the concern, not so much at your council level, but at a strategic sub-regional level, that there are a number of these projects that are happening right now. Another one's Totara Street Cycleway, for instance. And these projects will increase carbon emissions, and Waka Kotahi and regional council staff confirm that will happen. Even TCC staff confirm that. So we're sort of not about trying to just come in and criticise the projects and walk away, but trying to look at how we can get a better evidence base and actually get better outcomes on the ground. So trying to figure out if there's a quicker way of doing this rather than. I must have to click on the next each time. Does it work on the roll? Oh, I see. Oh, right, it's better. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so we're seeing at a sub-regional level, our big concern is that there's no clear vision around the smart growth planning process, particularly from a public point of view. So you might have insights as councillors, and I know there's all sorts of discussions around the Eastern City and various things that, you know, the great unwashed are not aware of, but ultimately, you know, these things affect people's lives, and we're concerned, you know, when your representatives go into that environment, that it's a well-informed discussion and hopefully a transparent and open discussion with local communities. And, you know, for instance, I'm sure some of you are well aware of the implications of say, going to Te Puna community and talking to them about what some of the plans that I've heard discussed, you know, for that area. And I think some of the presumably will still be shocked at sort of knowing what's on the drawing boards at Smart Growth. So we also see there's no sustainability strategy at all at that level. So while there's good work being done again in the Western Bay, you know, ultimately it has to be a bigger picture. It has to be part of a sub-regional and regional approach, or else the whole thing will collapse, really. No carbon emissions targets for the region, and increasing emissions, increasing congestion, all the other things that you know all about. And we sort of think the core of it is this growth agenda that I don't think you have the consent of the Tauranga Western Bay of Plenty public to sort of say, we've sorted out a plan, you know, we've got this sorted, because I don't think the conversations with communities have happened. The lack of consultation on UFTI, the lack of consultation on the transport system plan, and now the joint spatial plan. And it was interesting to us, Joe is formerly was the chair of the Environment Sustainability Forum, and I've been involved in some of those smart growth forums. And when there was a united call for consultation on that plan, it just happened to coincide with when the forums were scrapped. So it did seem like a conscious effort by Smart Growth, and I'm not pointing fingers at your council, but certainly, you know, together the partners decided not to talk to the public about any of these things. So our sort of approach to this is to try to support processes that empower communities to make informed decisions. That we think there's a lack of information, education, if you like, a lack of understanding about some of these issues. We're trying to just be, you know, play a small part in helping out with that. And we think the strength we have is that we can say things that some of the other organisations are probably not able to say because of their allegiances or other, you know, contractual issues or various things. We're trying to keep this completely independent. So that's the role we're trying to fill. And we do that through events, through presentations at various community networks, community organisations. We do it through analysis planning. We do blog articles, social media posts, all the usual sort of things. But mainly it's just through connecting as much as we can with people in local communities. And we've done, you know, some great work. What we've tended to do in the Western Bay so far has been very positive. And I know some of the Katikati Waihi Beach councillors are aware of when we did the green room in partnership with Tourism Bay of Plenty and had that program out in that area. Was tried to support Sustainable Waihi Beach grants group over in Te Puke. We haven't really turned up much, have we? But I think that's mainly just because I think you've got a good group looking at cycleways around that area, and some good support now from central government and council funding to try and get some things happening. So we're not trying to just come in and do things where we're not needed, but we are happy to help out wherever we can. So I guess I don't know if you want to add anything, Joe. Yeah, just if you have any quick questions, we're happy to answer anything.
Thank you, Glenn. Are there any questions for Glenn there? Councillor Sol.
Thank you for the presentation and so on. And actually, for me, you've just given me a bit more of what you're about, which is what you came here for. So I'm really pleased. I still have, personally, how I've been looking at some of this, and I've been looking at it from maybe a totally different angle. And I noticed up there you had nothing really about water. but you had a bit about CO2. And to me in New Zealand, I still have this feeling, and so I'm asking, the question is basically, where do you sit with how we work with water? And I'm not talking about Three Waters as in the thing coming from central government. I'm talking about our waters in general and how that affects our well-being and so on. And to me, if we went to zero carbon in New Zealand, we would make absolutely not even a blip on the carbon map in the world. And so we're spending a lot of money on that. When if we spent a lot more money maybe, or diverted a lot of that money towards improving our waterways and our streams, our ocean, etc., it has benefits on the CO2 situation as we obviously grow trees and things along those areas and clean up the water. It immediately means our waterways are better for food, for all the other environmental issues. And we actually, in New Zealand, benefit from actions that we do. And I just, perhaps my question or challenge to you is, perhaps it's time to look a little harder at something that actually shows a return to our country, our people, as opposed to the one that really, as I say, if we went 100%, it's just nothing in the world, and we pay for it. If we pay for an improvement in our waterways and generating trees along it and our forests, etc., hey, we get better oxygen levels, etc. The carbon levels improve. That's where I'm coming from.
Okay. I mean, I agree in terms of the water. I suppose I'm in the camp of and so sort of the climate mitigation and adaptation and clean water but I'm well aware of the trade-offs that are needed and the costs. And I think, you know, it's a very valid issue. I suppose the reason I'm wanting both is because I think New Zealand ranks as one of the highest emitters of carbon per capita in the world. So I think we should be playing our part, but I agree, it's probably increasingly unlikely that we're going to see what New Zealand does inspire others to take big action in time to sort of turn that whole thing around. You know, I think that's the reality that people are trying to grapple with these days. And so I definitely wouldn't try to reduce carbon at the expense of clean water or you know, having adequate water infrastructure or anything like that. But I would hold out hope that there might be still a way to try and do that in conjunction with it. And certainly in terms of climate adaptation, I think the things go together very well. And I will use the opportunity to raise that, you know, I was pleased that your council had reconsidered the council's position on Three Waters. We'd done a submission last year and we have serious concerns about that. And I think one of our concerns is that if Three Waters still goes through as, you know, as the current default option, the cost to the country will be immense. And we would rather see that money go, rather than going to private, you know, financiers or whatever you want to put it, we would rather it go to low carbon projects. So we're not opposed to having good water infrastructure at all. We totally support that and we totally support clean water, but we think your council's probably got the position right now where you're questioning that officially. And we think Three Waters is flawed simply for that, for exactly the reason you're talking about, which is that we need to focus on, you know, clean drinking water, you know, the right infrastructure. But that model would, I think, in the long term be incredibly, you know, problematic with the high debt levels and will mean we will sacrifice our climate goals in the long run.
Thank you, Glenn. Councillor Granger.
Thank you, Glenn. You had a graph up there and a blue line chart of showing New Zealand as being particularly bad.
Yeah.
Or blue, green, whatever. It's vertical access is percent of what?
Oh, yeah. So that's the percentage increase in the CO2 net CO2 emissions since 1990. So Turkey's sort of, you know, blown it out of the water, but New Zealand is still very high. So that's net, that includes the forestry offset side of it. So, but even on a gross basis, like we're still doing badly. And I think that's really the main point, is not so much sort of what the precise amount is, but it's more that I've met a number of people who say, but we're already cutting emissions and putting so much money into that and cutting it. We're not even investing the full amount of the proceeds from the emissions trading scheme to reduce carbon emissions. So it's actually, people are paying money into that scheme, and that money is being diverted into things other than reducing carbon emissions. So my own view is that, and we haven't got a trust position, but my view is that, you know, that scheme should just be, you know, funding carbon reduction, really.
Councillor Daly.
Glenn, Western Bay Plenty's district is a pretty spread out community, far-flung towns. Have you got any suggestions that our council could implement on a reasonably cost-effective basis to improve public transport networks and uptake?
Yeah, I was thinking this morning of Don's thing about being cheaper to buy an electric, what was it, Don? Buy an electric vehicle for, yeah, but which has tempted me to move. I'm tempted to move to Western Bay, go to Omakura for a few months and then apply for the, yeah. But I kind of think this is the big challenge, you know. So for those who don't know, I'm the Environmental Sustainability Advisor to the Regional Transport Committee, and I'm aware of all the funding constraints that are heading our way. And I know James heard at the meeting and, you know, probably conveyed just, yeah, I mean, it's not looking pretty. So I don't think it's a great time to be going to the government saying we want to put a whole, you know, gold-plated service all around the Western Bay. But and for those who are not aware, actually, I should say it's been clarified that Tauranga is included, and I'm not sure if you know where the Western Bay is. I haven't been able to find out if Western Bay urban areas are included in the within the Tauranga prioritisation of public transport in the 5 main centres. So that's something I'm still trying to look at, and I don't know if your staff know that, but that's a key one for me, is Te Puke included in that. If it's not included, I'd be happy to, you know, support writing to the government and saying it should be. But I think it's a really tough one, and I still think on-demand public transport is an interesting, you know, option. But I'm probably more in the space of park and ride being the only way to cost effectively sort of achieve some of the outcomes that, you know, I think your council is trying to achieve. And I know there seems to have been a reluctance from central government to fund some park and ride initiatives, but I think that's probably the best bang for buck. I don't know if you want to add anything, Joe.
I mean, I'll just add, I mean, I agree with Glenn, and I think because we look at the system that we're operating in, as opposed to, as Glenn said, an environmental issue, and the way we move about our communities, the way our communities connect, have such a massive impact on our emotional well-being, our physical health, because of the pollution, and also our finances. So at the moment, as a city, as a district, we're choked, we're clogged, we can't move, we can't get to where we need to go. People are disconnected. The vulnerable are the most impacted because they have no choice. They can't get in a car, they don't have that option. So it's more actually going back to, where should we put our focus? Why should we, you know, should we put it in water? And 100% agree, there should never be a and either or. But we're looking at the system, and the system is broken, and that's where we are trying to support decision makers to understand what we actually gain from addressing the system. If our city can, if our people can move around, the roads need to be to move people and freight, but we need to be able to connect people. And at the moment, that's lost. And where we're building our houses, again, from a systemic point of view, where we're building our houses, how we're building our houses, we can't just focus on one thing because of the connectivity across everything. So to go back to the question, do I support park and ride? It's a pretty common concept in so many parts of the world, but we sort of haven't really got our heads around it. But it can work. We just have to change the message. The message is let's build the roads and get people and cars on the roads. That's the message. That's what we're delivering to. But we actually need to move people, not cars. So by having, being innovative and being creative and trying to get people to move in a different way is a challenge, but it's possible.
Councillor Murray Benj.
Thank you. When 2015, the road to Omokoroa was meant to be 4-laned by 2015. Since then, congestion has got really, really bad. How much does that, and the transport agency don't take congestion into account? How, in fact, can we make sure that we've even got basic, decent roads for people to actually drive on until we get smaller buses that move more frequently and are more adaptable to people's needs, rather than these big empty things that run around at the wrong time and people don't use?
Mayor James could probably answer what I'm going to say, because he heard it at the RTC meeting the other day. But the thinking from regional councillors to cost effectively run the bus network, they need to have that peak capacity addressed. And I don't know about the Katikati or Mokoroa one, but a lot of the Tauranga City routes do need the big buses at peak time, especially for school. So that's one thing. But in terms of the wider point, as I understood it, I think congestion should be a key factor for Waka Kotahi to look at. And I think that's because the public, whatever anyone thinks and whatever I might think personally, the public certainly sees it as a key factor. And so I think often what happens is that certain projects are sort of shoehorned to try and fit into the transport plan, but then there's a political kind of thing that comes over the top, and people say, oh, but in this case, we better do it anyway because the public needs it. And I mean, I know you'll be well aware of all that. So I think the TNL is a good case in point. And I think our trust view is that it, and with due respect, I don't know where the staff are at the moment, but we've always thought that the priority lane on the TNL seems a bit of a ludicrous make-believe story in order to secure the funding. Like, they should have just come out and said, the plan was to develop it Omokoroa, you need a 4-lane highway, build the highway. That's the political reality and the public reality. But I think the story that there needs to be a T3 lane or a bus lane, certainly a bus lane, is just a ridiculous thing, because you'd have one bus every few hours and the lane would be empty. So they quickly, I don't think that was ever serious, but I know your staff have had to kind of, try to fit within this silly context, and we'd much rather look at things. That's why we mentioned Cameron Road project, which, affects people who live in the Western Bay as much as in Tauranga. And we think the idea of a rapid transit style, well, it's quoted to us as London Underground style development down Cameron Road, is just a joke. That it's what's being built is not going to be a rapid transit for the people in the Lower Kaimai. This massive growth area that we heard is going to be tens of thousands of people there in the next 30 years. I don't think they'll be all going on a bus down Cameron Road. It defies common sense. If they're going to end up in Papamoa or end up in Otamotai or wherever they're going, they need fit for purpose public transport that is fast and competitive with cars. They don't want to have a slow placemaking project down Cameron Road that doesn't adequately serve buses or bikes or probably cars and pedestrians. Yeah.
I look to wind this up, but I've got a question from Councillor Henry.
Yeah, you've just touched on what I was going to ask you about. I had 2 questions. That Cameron Road going right out to way past State Highway 29 with the housing out there. I'd always thought that was with intense housing all along Cameron Road, and more bus services going, that would be a really good option for reducing carbon. But you've just explained to me that there are other patches of it, infill housing, that are not going to be, they don't have that option to be able to use a bus service like that Cameron Road strip. But you said it was not an option to reducing carbon.
Well, yeah, I could clarify if it's helpful that Joe and I were both involved as stakeholders and starting in 2017 for that project. And early on, they grappled with the fact that they couldn't just put 1 lane each way on existing 2-lane road, because that would, well, apart from anyone else, I remember emergency services saying it would just be chaotic. So they're going to have a bus lane and a other lane. And what we've noticed is that the sort of decisions that were made all the way through that 4-year process, it was compromising aspects of that project. So, and it is tricky, we're certainly not saying it was an easy project to design, but fundamentally further down towards Tauranga City Centre, there was a very big corridor, and we thought there could have been you could be all things to all people down that end. It's much trickier up through Gate Park, Gretton, but the problem for the carbon emissions is that it actually, the project will slow down the buses between Elizabeth Street and 15th Ave by 2.5 minutes. So that means someone who's on a car could go, well, I'll zip down Fraser Street, or I'll go down the highway, or whatever, that you've got flexibility. But if you're on a bus and you're coming from Tauriko, and the buses, even if they do turn up in time, and even if they are reliable, which they're certainly not now, then you're going to have a slow process and go to the Gretton hub, and you eventually come back out onto Cameron Road, and eventually you go past all
So
the,
it's not a quick
it's
one.
very, very slow.
Just one last question. If with most of our people who are working with the council are on a service contract, what would be a couple of your top deliverables if you had a service contract with Western Bay District Council?
I think, I mean, I don't know what, Joe, I'd be happy for you to chip in, but I mean, with what we're talking about with actually with Whakatane councillors, if there's stuff we can do in terms of the climate change space to try to look at having the community involved in some of these discussions that would need, I think there are aspects of trade-offs that are never talked about. And I think because of limited funding particularly from councils, but even from central government, I think it's good to have some sort of robust discussions around that. And so we're talking about sort of facilitating some events and things there. And we've got something along those lines that we're just planning with Trevelyan's, who's one of our funding partners. They're wanting to do something in Te Puke and have like a community discussion around climate change and particularly focusing on the horticultural sector. But so things like that. But I guess generally transport's another big area that we sort of see. It's been in my previous role, I ran a smart transport forum a few years ago, and we were sort of thinking that there has been just a lack of connectivity around the big picture transport planning. So we'd be very keen to do something in that space as well to support what your council's doing, because we think you are doing some really good work in that space.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for your presentation, Glenn and Joe. So appreciated that. I think we better move on with the meeting now, but appreciate the time.
Thank you very much for your time. I know we've gone on a little bit longer than you probably can.
Okay, so we'll move on to page 8 and the community board minutes for receipt. So we've got the minutes for the Katikati Community Board on the 8th of February, a call for mover and seconder, Councillor Daly, okay, and Councillor Henry. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Minutes of the Mokurua Community Board meeting on the 14th of February, call for mover and seconder to approve those. Councillor Thwaites, Councillor Murray Benge, all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Page 25, the minutes of the Te Puke Community Board meeting on the 16th of February. Now there's an amendment there to note the resolution for item 9.4 will be amended at the next Te Puke Community Board meeting on the 13th of April to reflect that the board granted the sum of $500, not the larger amount that's currently listed there, to Tautoko Mai Sexual Harm Support Services Trust. So can I get a mover and a seconder to approve those minutes, please? Councillor Daly, Councillor Wickers, all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Page 32, the minutes of the Makati Community Board meeting held on 21st of February. Call for mover and seconder, Councillor Deputy Mayor Scrimger, Councillor Crawford. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Minutes of the Waihi Beach Community Board meeting on the 27th of February. I'll call for a mover and seconder for those, please. Councillor Sol, Councillor Henry. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Now we move to the council and committee meeting minutes for confirmation on page 58. That the minutes of the council meeting on the 8th of February be confirmed and adopted. I'll move that. Councillor Murray Benge seconding. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Minutes of the Projects and Monitoring Committee from the 22nd of February. Now, on this one, there are some editorial changes to be made. Firstly, that Councillor Wickers did not return to the meeting. And secondly, there's some renumbering of items to accurately reflect the order of business. You'll recall that was the order was shuffled around a bit on the day. And also a spelling error within the minutes of the SCADA report. So there'll be a new recommendation 1 that the minutes of the Projects and Monitoring Committee meeting held on 22 February 2023 be confirmed as a true and correct record, and the recommendations therein be adopted following minor editorial amendments, and that the council delegates to the governance manager the authority to make minor editorial amendments to the minutes of that meeting. So if I'll call for a mover and seconder for those new recommendations. Councillor Thwaites, Councillor Sol. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Now I move page 91, minutes of the Te Kahui Mana Whenua o Tauranga Moana meeting on the 9th of February. Call for a mover and seconder. Councillor Granger, Councillor Henry. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. And now we can move on to the reports. Item 11, page 97. And we've got the delegations for the Resource Management Act and Local Government Rating Act. So I think Rachel and Lizzie are going to speak to that.
Thank you, Mayor James. Just before we go to the substantive report, I'd like to introduce to you Lizzie McEwen. Lizzie, part of Lizzie's role is as Council's Privacy and Information Advisor. Within that portfolio, she's also responsible for ensuring that our delegations remain completely up to date. She has authored this report today, and I'll just ask you to introduce it.
Good morning, Mayor James. Good morning, councillors. So the reason for this report, as you probably have already read, is that under section 34A of the RMA and 132 of the Local Government Rating Act, the CEO is prohibited from subdelegating his powers, duties and functions under this legislation. So in order to get this passed, it must be made by full resolution of council. The attachment 1, you'll see the delegations assigned to those roles. This is necessary due to the amount of staff changes we've had and the new roles we have here in the organisation. And it's important that our staff are equipped or adequately equipped to fulfil their duties and their roles. So these are very complex pieces of legislation. So we have sought legal advice prior to this, and we have made assessments against other councils' delegations and how they've rolled theirs out. So we're aligned that way. So unless Rachel has more to add.
Okay, so any questions for Lizzie or Rachel? Councillor Granger.
Thank you. Very comprehensive list there. I read it all.
Yes.
Do we have to approve the changes in Amendment 2 as well?
No, you do not. No.
So
So the Amendment 2 is the roles. That's just setting out what roles we have. So the old roles versus the new roles. So we're just changing the names there. And it's just for transparency, I suppose, so people coming into new roles or who have had role name changes, it's transparent and easy to recognise that they could potentially have new delegations under their new roles. So that's more of an information part.
Councillor Murray Benge.
Were we doing it incorrectly before?
No, no, not at all, no.
Councillor Wickers.
Just a question around the, are these delegations for a period of time or are they sort of in perpetuity?
These are for the lifetime of the role. So we would reassess these throughout the year. And we use some software called LocoSoft, and we receive updates. So if there's new pieces of legislation that come through, then we get alerted to that immediately. So we can act on it as they come through. But there will be regular reviews of delegations.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? No? Oh, Councillor Joyce.
So going down through the list under the Resource Management Act, there's some issues around obligation to hold a hearing. Are there limitations on those? Because there's a bit of discussion, certainly at our side of the district, about delegation of decisions on planning hearings and things. And I was really wondering how that's managed and how this affects that, if at all.
So the decision on notified applications is made by qualified commissioners of the District Plan Committee, either with or without independent hearings commissioners as well, depending on the complexity of the application. That specific provision you're referring to, Councillor Joyce, enables under delegated authority the obligation to hold a hearing to be dispensed with where there are no submissions.
Okay, there are 3 recommendations there. I'll look for a mover and seconder for those 3 recommendations, please. Councillor Murray-Benge, Councillor Henry. Any debate? In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we move to page 124, which is the delegation of decision-making for the 2023 Community Matching Fund. Sam will take us through this.
Morena, Mayor James and councillors. Community Matching Fund 2023. I'm taking that everyone has read it and happy to take any questions.
Any questions? No. Councillor Murray-Benge has moved. And seconder, Councillor Henry. Any debate? Councillor Joyce.
Just a question. I mean, I presume we have managed to spend 100% of what's been given in previous rounds, or is it sometimes that the groups can't actually?
I think I'll answer that. I think it's because I was on the committee last time. It's about 4 or 5 times oversubscribed, so it isn't. We haven't had no trouble spending all that money. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Any further debate? In which case, I shall put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Sam and Jody. Now we move to page 127, which is the appointment of tangata whenua representatives to Smart Growth Leadership Group. Rachel.
Thank you, Mayor James. I'm just happy to take the report as read and answer any questions.
No questions? Look for a mover and seconder then. Councillor Granger. I'll second it. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. 11.4 on page 130, the appointment of a local controller. Gary.
I'm happy to take this read, Mayor James, unless you want me to talk about the number of controllers we've got and how it works.
Any questions? Okay.
Okay, so at the moment, so each council is required to resource its emergency operating centre, and that includes having controllers. So the controllers have superpowers in a declared emergency. At the moment, our lead controller is Peter Watson, and then we have Scott Parker, who's also experienced, Kerry Little, who's done the training but hasn't acted as controller in an emergency, and myself. What we have seen through experience, particularly for the Hawke's Bay event that we've currently occurred, we need to have a deep pool of trained resources to be able to respond, particularly when there might be an ongoing event. We also get requested to supply personnel to assist other areas. Just like we had a big event, we would ask for help to come from other areas. Dell has been in that role, controller role in the Hawke's Bay and Napier, I think, for 7 years. She's done the Sims 4 training, experienced, and so would add to our pool. The way we work it is that generally we would have Peter, Scott and Kerry operating, but it means both Adele and I can step into that role if required.
Thank you. You happy you moving or you? Oh, please ask a question.
I thought it was alarming that the Mayor of Napier, in order to get any contact with anybody else, had to drive for 5 hours to actually meet with the regional. So coming to local is really quite important. But Gary, my question is, do your controllers at any stage respond and go out and speak to community groups?
They can do. So we tend to have our two emergency management staff go out and speak to community groups. So Joe Linsky and Ellie. So they deal particularly with the community groups. We are happy to have controllers speak to community groups, but we'd be doing it particularly trying to educate around how the system works and the preparedness that people need to undertake themselves and their communities in terms of being prepared for an event. So, for example, Joe works with community response teams. But yeah, if there's a request, we can have someone to go and speak, or we get someone from the regional council to go and speak because they've got the group control function.
Okay, so you're happy to move the three recommendations, Councillor Mobenge, Councillor Joyce. I'll put the motion. If there's no further debate, all those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And I just want to take the opportunity to congratulate Adele for that, if that's the right word, but also thank her for her work in Napier recently, where she went out to assist them over there. So thank you for that. I'm sure it was appreciated. Moving on to the item 11.5 on page 133, elected members representation at Anzac Day 2023. I'm sure there aren't any questions or debate on this, so I'm looking for a mover and seconder, please. Councillor. Please do.
I have represented the council for over a decade at the memorial service at Memorial Park on Anzac Day, and it really is special. And I'm sure, sir, that you will find it so. It was a bit of a muddle last year, and I just hope that and you might even like to inquire.
You jumped in a little bit ahead. I was going to suggest or acknowledge that you have attended in recent times. I'm happy for you to continue that practice. If you remember last time, you and I accompanied former Mayor Webber, and I'm happy that you accompany me this time. So,
right,
yeah.
But sir, that's not my point really.
Okay.
My point, and I will be there, thank you. But my point is the Tauranga City is responsible for the program, and it was a botched up job last year. And I quite offended the commissioner when I said that, because the poor fellow who was running the program was absolutely nervous, and he just went by the list that was presented to him, and Western Bay were not on it. And so it was Simon Bridges who spoke to the colonel, who went up, and so then we were called forward. So I just say, sir, I don't know what your network's like, but it might be if you could have some influence and just ensure that they've got your program right.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'd characterise it as a botch up. Someone forgot to read a name out, and that's human error. I'm sure they won't make that mistake again, or hope they won't, and we'll move on. So, yeah. So if you're moving, you're seconding Councillor Crawford. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Now we move to item 11.5, which is my report to council. If you like, I'll give my verbal report on the rural and provincial sector, and then you can ask questions on that and anything else in the report. So the rural and provincial sector meeting, which is convened by LG&Z, took place on the 2nd and 3rd of March. We had a good deal of discussion about resilience and council experience of recent and not so recent disasters. There was a launch of a free support and counselling service for all elected members I wanted to take this opportunity. Did you all receive that email offering those services? If not, I can forward it to you, but I thought it had gone to all of you. Okay, well, we can forward that on to you. Okay. There was a good presentation from Katikati based tiny house builders. Rebecca, the local person there, is president of the association, so she gave a good talk on that one. And we had a presentation from the government minister, Kieran McAnulty, which was well received. He assured us there was a new Three Waters plan or amended plan coming soon. In fact, it would have been announced there if his team hadn't been busy also dealing with emergencies, because he's the civil defence minister. He is seeking a balance between financial sustainability and increasing the link between communities and water service entities. So I guess we'll see where that lands when it's announced. So that was sort of the highlights. Obviously, it's a day and a half conference, can hardly summarise in 2 minutes, but there we are. So if there are any questions on that or anything else in my report, please go ahead. Councillor Murray-Benj.
2 questions, sir. When you met with Michael Wood, were you hopeful that he would make sensible decisions relating to our roading network, which he has completely taken off the 10-year plan?
I'm always hopeful, Councillor Murray-Benj, but he was listening, and he did a convincing job of, listening to our concerns. It was done in chambers with Councillor Chair Tolley and Doug Leader and others. So it was we had a good discussion, and he understood our concerns and what we wanted.
Right. And the second question is, I saw a photo of you on the paper on the mayoral job scheme.
Yes.
Which one is that in here?
Okay, so that's one. Actually, it's not. I don't think it's listed on this one. So there's the MTFJ, which is the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. There's 2 aspects to that. There's the 2-year program. One is where I take a Māori mentee, I guess, and she's actually in university at Victoria at the moment. So when I was down for Royal and Provincial, I took the opportunity to meet with her, get to know her. That was good. And then there's also where the photo you're referring to, which is taken against that wall over there, that is with Davina, who is our coordinator for the program, which is about helping youth in particularly in Te Puke into jobs. So that's I'm not sure it was listed. There was a meeting that was just a photo op for me and her. Yeah. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Crawford.
Hey, and just looking at all these lists, there's a new mayor in that. How are you finding there's all these meetings? Are you getting across the whole district or?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Very busy. Yes.
No, but yeah, so you feel you're getting a good, there's enough that's capturing the whole from Waihi Beach to.
I think you'll see on the list there's quite a good spread. So yeah, I am getting around.
I'm asking you whether.
Yeah, I think so.
That's good. Thanks.
Okay, I look for. I'll move my report. There's a seconder, Deputy Mayor Scrimger. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Now, the Chief Executive's extraordinary report. Oh, sorry, it's not extraordinary. Chief Executive's Officers Meeting Report on page 137. Did you want to talk to that, John? No? Any questions? Any questions? No, I'll move that. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Henry. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Which brings us to the end of the open section of the meeting. So I'll now call for a mover and seconder to exclude the public. Councillor Granger.